the big question was who was going to be the running back for the Jaguars, and it's definitely Etienne. They had 32 rushing attempts. He had half of them, 16 rushing attempts for 143 yards. Welcome to Just the Stats NFL, the show that covers the NFL statistical leaders from the all-time greats to the current players leading the NFL. I am Ernie Jennings, your host, as I adjust my mic here. And this is our first episode of a post-game, looking at the games after the fact. First week's in the books, except for Monday Night Football. And some of the games were really good. Some were interesting in other ways. But really enjoyed watching football. So the way I'm going to do this is my take on how I think I'll do in between weeks. Every week during the regular season is I'll do 2 days, Monday, Tuesday. I think I'll do post-game, looking at the games that happened over the weekend. Wednesday, I'll go through the standings and the stats, who's leading the NFL and so forth, whether it's actual, real NFL game stuff or fantasy. And then Thursday and Friday will be previews of the upcoming week. So I think that'll take up the week, each week. Try to get through all the games every week. Now on Friday, I may do a preview, finish the previews, but also do the Thursday night game as well. So we'll see, but that's probably what I'll do. Just throw that one game in there and then move on from there and wait for the Sunday, Monday games. All right, so that's the plan. Any comments on that? You can post them up on Just the Stats NFL on YouTube, or hit me up on X, or even my email at justthestatsnfl@gmail.com, and let me know what you think. All right, so we're going to start with the game that I was definitely the most interested in, which is always going to be the Jaguars. They did win their game against the Carolina Panthers 26-10. They looked pretty good in the game for the most part. Overall, the Jacksonville had 378 yards total offense. Carolina had 255. And a lot of that for Carolina came toward the end of the game when it was 26-3, 23-3, and they ended up getting a touchdown. But Jacksonville, I think, started to play a little different type of defense. I hate the prevent defense, but that's kind of what they did. But we'll look at the stats, but it was a good game for the Jaguars. They needed to get that first game under their belt. So let's look at the teams overall. All right. So one of the things I've been doing is as I have talked about, and if you listen to the pregame ones, is looking at the stats that we're going to be looking at certain players, and as they move up the list of the all-time for their team or for the NFL. So, for example, Chuba Hubbard, who had a decent game, he needed quite a bit of yards. He needed well over 150, 60 yards to move into fifth all-time in the rushing list for the Carolina Panthers. He only got 57. So he has now, which puts him, he's still in sixth, and Deshaun Foster's in fifth, and that's what we're looking at. But he has 3,232 yards now, so he's going to need 105 yards next game, which I'm fine for him getting it next game since it's not against the Jaguars, to pass Deshaun Foster to move into fifth. And then that was really it for the Carolina Panthers as far as stats go. Now for their team in this game particularly, Young, who did definitely show signs of improvement at the end of last year, did not look good. Really didn't look good at all. He was 18 for 35, which is just over 50% for only 154 yards. He did throw one touchdown, but that was honestly more the running back or the receiver, which I think was a running back. No, I guess it wasn't. Oh yeah, it was Chuba Hubbard. Yeah. And which is, if you were a Chuba Hubbard fan, he really pulled you out with that touchdown. But it was really all Chuba Hubbard on that touchdown run off the catch. But he did have one touchdown, 2 interceptions. He was sacked only once, but he was harassed a lot. He did fumble the ball once. It just didn't look good at all. He really, it was almost like regression for him. As far as the rushing game goes for them, talking about the main people you might have had, Chuba Hubbard had 16 rushes for 57 yards, and he dominated the rushing in this game for Carolina. They had a total of 25 in rushing attempts, and he had 16 of them. Interestingly enough, Young had more rushing attempts than Dowdle did, which you would have thought that Dowdle would have been the second running back coming off there, but he only had 3 to the 5 for Young. And Travis Etienne's brother had 1 rush for 4 yards in that game. So you had the Etienne brothers in this game together. Now, as far as receiving goes, it was definitely McMillan. This rookie, I think he's going to be good. He had 5 receptions, and considering the fact that he only threw 18 completions, I'm talking about Young, McMillan had 5 of the receptions for 68 yards. He looked really good. You could see he was targeted 9 times, and you could really see Young looking his direction. I think he's going to be the guy. And then after that, really, you had Chuba Hubbard, 3 receptions for 32 yards, and Leggett, 3 receptions for only 10 yards, and then a couple more for other people. So really it was McMillan. Now, Renfro only had 2 receptions. He was targeted 6 times, and Leggett 7 times. So really the receptions to targets wasn't very good for those 2, but McMillan really had some good catches, almost had a spectacular catch as well that just couldn't quite hold on to it, but he really did look good. That's some of the players on that team as far as the offense go. Now, looking at the Jaguars, Trevor Lawrence really didn't have a great game either, but honestly, he didn't have to. They did run the ball a lot more. Lawrence was 19 for 31 for 178 yards. He did throw an interception, but fortunately, he also had a touchdown pass, so that was beneficial. Fantasy-wise, not really a great game for him. Now, for the rushing, the big question was who was going to be the running back for the Jaguars, and it's definitely Etienne. They had 32 rushing attempts. He had half of them, 16 rushing attempts for 143 yards. So almost a 9 yards a carry average. He did have a long of 71 yards, but he looked good for the game. Bigsby had 5 carries. Lawrence had 4. Tootin, 3. And even Allen, so they had had 1. So all 4 running backs, none of them were held out for this game. They all had at least 1 touch of the ball, but it was definitely Etienne was the guy carrying the ball. I was a little surprised down close to the end zone. He was the running back in there even for that. But overall, he really did look good. No touchdowns for anybody rushing except for Brian Thomas. And if you had him, you're happy that he had that because he did not look good. He dropped a pass, a short pass. And talking about the receivers, Thomas, for like I said, 1 catch for 11 yards. He was targeted 7 times, had 1 catch. So if not for that touchdown run, his numbers would have really looked bad. So he only actually had 2 times that he had the ball in his hands for a total of 20 yards. Really wasn't good. It was Travis Hunter. Short catches for sure, but he was targeted 8 times and had 6 receptions to lead the team. And also Strange, really, as the tight end, looked good as well. 4 catches on 4 targets for 59 yards. He really did look good. Deontay Brown had 3 for 52, and Etienne out of the backfield had 3 for 13. So those are the primary ones. But really, Travis Hunter had 6 of the receptions out of the 19 that he threw, that Lawrence threw, and was targeted 8 times. So was definitely looked at targeted, except for Thomas. He did try to get the ball to Thomas 7 times. It just never could connect, except for one little short pass. And so kind of rough there. So that's the game. And as I said, Jacksonville won that game 26-10. All right, let's look at the next game. The Arizona Cardinals. Let me back up real quick and just say that the all-time record between the Carolina Panthers and the Jacksonville Jaguars it was a tie, actually, 4-4. So now Jacksonville leads the series 5-4 all-time. And that, the teams haven't been around long enough, 76. So they don't have that many games against each other. All right, next game, Arizona Cardinals at the New Orleans Saints. Arizona won the game 20-13. It was kind of what you were hoping you wouldn't see in some ways. Murray sometimes looked good, and sometimes you just wondered a little bit. And so we'll talk about that a little bit as we get into it. Now, looking at the overall stats, going back to the stats all time, looking at the Saints, this was a home game for the Saints. And this was just like the previous game we talked about. Arizona and the New Orleans Saints were tied at 16 wins apiece. So Arizona now holds a 17-16 lead, an all-time record against the New Orleans Saints. So they were also very close. But going into the game, Alvin Kamara was already all-time leader for the Saints in rushing yards and TDs. He just extended those out with his 45 yards rushing and 1 TD. So he looked pretty good there. James Conner only had 39 yards. He had a little bit of a difficult time running. The Saints defense really did a good job against the running game. But he was pushing Jim Otis for third. He's still a long ways away. He needed almost 200 yards. He only got 39. So even going into next week's game, he's still going to need 156 to pass Jim Otis for third all-time in the Cardinals records. Looking at some of the receivers for the Saints, Alvin Kamara again. This is in yardage here, is moving up. He only needed 29 yards to pass Jimmy Graham for sixth, and he only got 12 in the game. This is where you would have thought Alvin Kamara would have been the strongest, was in the passing game. So in this game, he really didn't have but 57 yards total. So not too good. And then looking at the defense, this was a kind of a fun thing. You had 2 old-timers. It was kind of a fun thing to watch. 2 old-timers on defense. One, Calais Campbell for Arizona Cardinals, and then Cameron Jordan for the New Orleans Saints. They've both been at this for a long time, and they're both up there in the all-time record for tackles for loss. Jordan's 10th right now. Calais Campbell's 3rd. And Calais Campbell, unfortunately for him, did not get any tackles for loss. He's already the Cardinals' all-time leader with 107, but he's in his career, he has 187. He was pushing J.J. Watt for second, who has 195, but he didn't have any this game. On the other hand, Cameron Jordan did have 2, so he just extends out his lead. He's the all-time leader for the Saints in tackles for loss, so he now has 162 all-time. And we'll look at the preview. He's not close enough yet to move into 9th all-time in the NFL, but he did make a progress in that direction. Now, Cameron Jordan, while he's moving up the list all-time NFL in tackles for loss, he's already he was second in sacks for the Saints with 121.5. He had 1.5 sacks in this game, so he tied Ricky Jackson for the all-time record in sacks for the Saints. One more sack, and he will be the leader all by himself. So Cameron Jordan has definitely been the guy for the Saints throughout his career. And then and that was really it. That was it for the stats. So let's look at the Arizona. We'll look at the away team. We'll go with that. Arizona Cardinals. Murray, 21 for 29 in the passing for 163 yards. He did have 2 touchdown passes. his rate was 108.8. So pretty good game for him, actually. They kind of ran a controlled game. Now, interesting on the rushing department for the team. Benson had 8 carries. Connor had 12. But Benson did look, whether he looked better or he did have one big rush for 52 yards. So honestly, the rest of them, 7 carries for 17 yards. So like I said, except for that one breakaway rush by Benson, the Saints did a pretty good job of holding down the running game for the team. They did have 146 yards, but like I said, they ran it 27 times for 5.4 yards per carry. And if it wasn't for that 52-yard carry rush, it wouldn't have been that good of an average, really. But they did stick to the running game, and they didn't have to pass it. They had the lead pretty much the entire game. They were leading 17-10 at halftime, and then 20-10 by the end of the third quarter. And New Orleans was only able to put up a field goal near the end of the game to make it 2013, Arizona winning it. So it's going to be interesting to watch Connor and Benson. This is almost a split, 12 carries to 8 carries. And in the receiving department for Arizona, Connor had 4 receptions. So he touched the ball 16 times. Benson had 1 reception. So basically, Connor touched the ball 16 times to Benson's 9. So Connor's still the guy, and we'll just see how it goes from there. Back to the rushing real quick. Murray did carry the ball 7 times for 38 yards. So he did run it a little bit, and most of them were not planned. There was a couple where he was intentionally running it, but even him running, he only averaged a little over 5 yards a carry on that. So now in the passing game, McBride definitely looked as good as he did last year. 6 catches for 61 yards. He really looked good. He was targeted 9 times. Now, Marvin Harrison did look good. Compared to last year, I really thought he looked good. And he does look, if you saw the game, he put on 11 pounds of muscle. He really looks much stronger. And in fact, in a 45-yard pass he had, he really fought off the defender and caught the ball. Really good. He did look good. He had 5 catches for 71 yards, and he had a touchdown pass. So he was targeted 6 times. So the tight end McBride 9 times, Harrison 6 times. And then Connor had 4 receptions, but only for 5 yards, but one of them was a touchdown. So Connor did ultimately have a decent game. He didn't have many yards. He only totaled out to 44 yards, but he did have 4 receptions, and one of them was a touchdown. So that helped his stats somewhat. And then you had a bunch of other receivers who only had 1 catch. But the top 3, McBride, Harrison, and Connor for the team. All right, looking at New Orleans. Now, Rattler was the quarterback, 27 for 46. No interceptions, no touchdowns. He was sacked once. He had a rating of 70.4. He looked all right. Not great, but he did have 27 completions, but for only 214 yards. I don't know. I guess he's doing the best he can. They really are going to need a quarterback. Now, in the running game, Alvin Kamara was 11 carries for 45 yards for almost a 4.1 average. And he did have a touchdown run. And after that, it was really a mixture. Rattler had 4 carries for 29 yards. And then you had Miller and Neal for the rest. So 22 carries for the team. Kamara had 11 of them. In the receiving department, Johnson, which was a little surprising here, had 8 receptions for 76 yards. He was targeted 11 times. Now, Olave was targeted more times, 13, but he had 7 receptions for 54 yards. So Olave was targeted quite a bit, and so was Shaheed. Shaheed had 9 targets, but 6 receptions for 33 yards. So those were definitely your top 3 receivers in the game. Kamara only had 2 receptions for 12 yards. So they were looking a little bit more not a little bit, quite a bit more to their wide receivers. And Olave, he's the guy you're going to watch a lot. And Shaheed is somebody actually you can pick up here and there. And Johnson, I bet money. I haven't looked for Johnson yet, but I bet money you could pick up him in fantasy leagues. I don't know if it's going to be the way it is all the time with Johnson having 11 targets in the game, but we'll see. So those are some of your leaders for the Saints with the game. Like I said, Arizona winning it 20-13. All right, next game, Tampa Bay Buccaneers at Atlanta Falcons. That game was a good game as well. Very close. Tampa Bay ended up winning it 23-20. And now the Tampa Bay Buccaneers tied the series. This was another close series. They're not all going to be this way. Atlanta had led the all-time series with Buccaneers by one game. Now they're tied up at 32 games apiece, each team winning 32. Now in this game, looking at some of the overall stats, start with the Falcons. Bijan Robinson, well, he needed quite a bit to move into ninth all-time. He only had 24 yards. So that was not good, obviously. So he didn't move up into ninth, not even close. He's got a long way to go still. Now, Mike Evans, well, that's still the other. Let's look at the rest of these are all Buccaneers. There was really nothing going on for the Falcons. Now, for the Buccaneers all-time, Baker Mayfield only needed one touchdown to tie Trent Dilfer for sixth all-time in touchdown passes. He actually ended up with 3, so he passed him to move into sixth all-time with 72 touchdown passes. Next up for him is Doug Williams, who has 73. So Baker Mayfield is looking at moving into the 5th spot all-time for this team. So we'll watch that probably next week. If he throws another 3, he'll definitely be on the way. Looking at receiving, Mike Evans already owns all the records. He just extended out his receptions now to 841. He had 5 in the game to extend his all-time record for the Buccaneers in receptions and in yards. He pushed that out to 12,735 yards. So he is moving up the ranks, already number 1 on the team, but moving up all time as well. Now, for the Buccaneers, Levante David, another player on defense, already holds the record for the team with 169 tackles for loss, which is what he had going into the game. He had 1 more, so he's at 170. So he's got a huge lead over anybody else as far as the team goes. So those are some of your all-time stats. Now, looking at the team as overall, Atlanta actually had way more yards here, total net yards, 358 yards for Atlanta, 260 for Tampa Bay. Now, Tampa Bay did have over 100 yards rushing with 101. On the other hand, not so much in the passing game, while Atlanta had 289 net yards passing. 298 yards all overall, but Penix was sacked once. So despite the total yards by Atlanta, they ended up somehow losing this game, but stats don't always tell the story there. Now in this game, looking at Atlanta, Penix, which was somebody everybody was interested in, see how he would do, threw the ball 27 out of 42. So quite a bit. 298 yards, 1 touchdown, had a 93.2 rating, quarterback rating. So not too bad, actually. Pretty good game for him. Now, the problem here was the rushing department. Robinson rushed the ball 12 times for 24 yards, and Algier rushed the ball 10 times for 24 yards. Penix actually, which is not something you would see him always doing, had 6 carries for 21 yards, and he actually had a touchdown. So they ended up with only 69 rushing yards for a 2.46 average. Really bad. They just did not have a running game going at all, which really put a dent in their game. Looking at the receiving then, it was London, though. 8 catches for 55 yards, no touchdowns. And Robinson, again, here's a save them. If you had him, obviously you're starting him on your fantasy team. He had 24 yards rushing, but he did have 6 catches for 100 yards receiving. So that really made his game. 50-yard touchdown pass he caught, which obviously mostly the running part in there. So he did have a touchdown there. He was targeted 7 times in this game. So despite the lack of running power, he did see the ball coming out of the backfield. One other receiver I want to talk about is the tight end Kyle Pitts. This was another curious thing for people. How was he going to fare in this game? He hadn't looked good the last couple of years, but he did quite well. 7 catches for 59 yards on 8 targets. So really a good game for him. Now, is this going to be the norm for him? We'll have to see. London, like I said, had 8 catches for 55 yards on 15 targets. So he was definitely the guy they were looking at overall. But Pitts and Robinson also had good games. So looks like those are going to be their top targets. Now looking at Tampa Bay, Mayfield, 17 completions on 32 attempts for only 167 yards. But he did throw 3 touchdowns. So if you had him as your quarterback, he saved you with those 3 touchdown passes. Was sacked once, but he ended up with a rating of 99.3. So not too bad there. Now in the running game, again, did a little bit better. This is interesting. Mayfield had 5 carries for 39 yards to lead the team as far as yards go. Irving, obviously the leading running back, had 14 carries for 37 yards for only a 2.67 yards per carry. So Atlanta defense did quite a good job holding. Actually, both defenses did good jobs holding the other team's running game down. I mean, Tampa Bay did run for 101 yards, so they did make an effort on 23 attempts. So Irving, out of 23 attempts, had 14 of the attempts. And then the quarterback had the other 5. No one else. I mean, White only had 2. And Igbuka, coming out of as a wide receiver, had 1 carry for 9 yards. So they ended up with almost a 4.4 yard average rushing. So, which is a good thing to see that they pushed that ball. They made the attempt to run it despite it not being there really for them in the game. Now, in the passing department, Mike Evans had 5 catches for 51 yards, no touchdowns. And the rookie, Igbuka, everybody's been wanting to see, and I have wanted to see this too because I do have him on a couple of my teams, had 4 catches for 67 yards. One was a 30-yard touchdown pass. He had 2 touchdowns in the game. He was targeted 6 times. Evans was targeted 8, so those were definitely the 2 you're looking at. Now, Shepard had 3 catches for 39 yards. He was targeted 6 times. And Irving out of the backfield was targeted 4 times. He did have 4 catches, but only 8 yards. But one of them was a touchdown. So good for him. Again, this is a running back, like we've seen even with Atlanta and other games, where the running back did not look good on the ground rushing it, but saved his stats by having a touchdown reception. So those are the players on that team. So we end up, as I said, Tampa Bay winning the game 23-20. All right, let's move on to the next game. Pittsburgh Steelers versus the New York Jets. In this series, the Pittsburgh Steelers lead the New York Jets now 23-7. This is a crazy game in a way. The game, Pittsburgh won the game 34-32. And I only say it's crazy in the sense that you've got 2 teams with pretty good defenses. I would not have expected to have a game with this kind of a score. That's what I find amazing. I just didn't think that would be the score. I thought it might be something like 17-10 or something like that. But no, it was 34-32. Quite a game. Now, when we're looking at the overall numbers, looking at the Jets, we'll start with the Jets. In the tackles for loss, this is really the only category that either team had anybody. But in the tackles for loss department, Quinnen Williams and Quincy Williams are 7 and 8, respectively, in the tackles for loss numbers. And John Abraham and David Harris have 55 apiece. They're 5th and 6th. They're tied for 5th, really. So Quinton Allen came into the game with 52, and Quincy Allen came into the game with 50. Quincy Allen had 1, so he's got 51 now. Quincy Williams had 1 for 51, and Quinton Williams had 2 for 54. So he only needs 1 more to tie Abraham and Harris for 5th all-time and 2 to move into sole 5th place all-time. Quincy Williams still needs 4 to tie and 5, so he'll probably be a couple weeks before he moves up this list. But Quinton Williams did have a good game with 2 tackles for loss. Now, on the Steelers side of this has been a battle for their all-time number 1 position. Right now, Cameron Hayward leads the team with 133 tackles for loss all-time. This was going into the game. TJ Watt had 126. So they were 1-2 all-time for Pittsburgh. Well, after the game, Cameron Hayward had 1, TJ Watt had 2. So now it's 134 for Hayward, 128 for TJ Watt. So he's cut the Cameron Hayward's lead from 7 to 6. So this will be a thing to watch the entire season. 2-to-1 ratio, TJ Watt will catch him, in say 7 more weeks. 7 more weeks. So that'll be fun to watch. All right. Looking at the overall stats for this game. And again, here's another game where New York Jets had 394 yards, total net yards. Pittsburgh Steelers had 271 net yards. Quite a big difference for the Jets, who come up on the losing end of this game. Rushing was the big area here. The Jets had 182 yards rushing, while Pittsburgh only had 53, despite running the ball 20 times. In the passing department, we'll get to those stats, but 218 yards passing for Pittsburgh, 212 for the Jets, so pretty close there. The only problem was Rodgers was sacked 4 times in this game. Still held on to win the game, but pretty good. All right, let's look at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Actually, you know what? I want to go with the loser first. So let's look at the Jets. Justin Fields, 16 passing completions on 22 attempts for 218 yards with 1 touchdown, no interceptions. He had a quarterback rating of 119.1. That's excellent. Really good. So you got to be excited for the Jets. You hate to see a loss this close, but you got to be excited with that kind of numbers for the quarterback. Now, Breece Hall, going into this whole preseason, just heard all kinds of stuff about Breece Hall. And, was he going to split time with Allen or not? Braylon Allen, and it's just all kinds of negative vibes around Breece Hall. Well, you can put those to rest. I guess it was just preseason gossip or something, because Breece Hall had 19 carries for 107 yards. He definitely led the team in rushing, while Braylon Allen had 6 carries for 9 yards. Now, Braylon Allen, if you had him, he did have a touchdown rushing. So that saved his stats. It was on an 8-yard touchdown run. So the rest of his carries had 5 more carries for 1 yard. Like I said, Breece Hall had 19 carries for 107. Justin Fields had 12 carries himself for 48. So those are your leading 2 running backs, rushers, I should say, not running backs. And I'm pretty sure this is going to way it's going to be every week, with Hall leading and Fields second, if we go by this. So a really good running game here. 39 rushes in this game, 31 by Hall and Fields, and only 8 by the Davis and Allen for 182 yards and almost a 4.7 yards per carry average. So pretty good. Now, when it comes to receiving, it was Garrett Wilson exclusively, really, here. 7 of the catches. So Fields had 16 completions. Wilson had 7 of them on 9 targets. 7 catches, 95 yards, and a touchdown. So a really good game for him. Breece Hall had 2 receptions for 38 yards. Pretty good for him. So he had a really good game. He touched the ball then 21 times in this game. Definitely the leading guy on this team as far as that goes offensively. So those are your leading players for the New York Jets. Now looking at the Pittsburgh Steelers, Rodgers, 22 for 30. Not bad. Really, actually good. Only 8 incompletions, 22 for 30 for 244 yards. He was sacked 4 times, but he did throw 4 touchdown passes, no interceptions. So he had a quarterback rating of 136.7. This is against a really good Jets defense, too. And obviously, Pittsburgh had a good defense as well, and one of the better ones. But, yeah, Rodgers had a good game there. When it comes to the rushing department now, Warren's their leading guy. He had 11 carries for 37 yards. It was a rough game for them in the running department. Gainwell was second with 7 carries for 19 yards. So no one really rushed the ball. They ended up with 20 carries for 53 yards for a 2.6 yard average. So pretty weak there. It really ended up being on the arm of Rodgers in this game. When looking at the receiving, Smith had 5 catches for 15 yards to lead the team on 6 targets. And then Austin 4. So he really spread this ball around. It was Metcalf I wanted to see. Metcalf did have 4 catches for 83 yards. That's really good numbers. And he did lead the team in targets with 7. Austin and Smith each had 6. So that's interesting to see. Freiermuth was a tight end. People were wondering who might be helping out Rodgers by him having that need to dump off to him. But he only had 3 catches for 28 yards. Touchdowns went to Smith, Austin. Now here's again, Jaylen Warren had one of the touchdowns, as well as Skowronek, somebody you're never going to start on your fantasy team. He had 1 catch for 22 yards and a touchdown. So kind of skews those numbers. But like I said, if you had Warren as your running back, which I very well may have on some team, rushing department only had 37 yards, but he did save himself with 2 catches for 22 yards and a touchdown. So that really saved his numbers there. So that's a look at this game. Interesting, if you followed Rodgers, you know that he favors. When he had Adams, he would force feed Adams that ball as much as he could. And he did throw the ball in the direction of Metcalf, who was the one I was going to be wondering if he would force feed him the ball. He did have more targets. He did have 4 catches for 83 yards. So really pretty good, decent game. Unfortunately, no touchdowns if you had him starting on your team. All right, that is the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Jets, with the Pittsburgh Steelers winning at 34-32. Moving on to the Cincinnati Bengals versus the Cleveland Browns. In this game, the Bengals won the game, very close game, and they lead the series against the Browns 56-48 all-time record there. Now, looking at some of the stats overall, the only one really to talk about is Trey Hendrickson, who is 6th all-time for the Bengals as far as tackles for loss. He had 1. He had 53 going into the game. He had 1. He's got 54. Sam Hubbard and Justin Smith are tied with 55 apiece. So Trey Hendrickson needs 1 now to tie. He didn't quite make it there to tie them or pass them. Needs 1 to tie, 2 to pass. So we'll watch next week if he can move into 4th all-time by himself in the tackles for loss. That's really the only stat in this game that was interesting to follow if you're following the team. Looking at the team stats here. Again, here's a surprise. It's kind of shocking, actually. Cincinnati had a total net yards of 141 net yards. Cleveland had 327, and they somehow managed to lose this game. Rushing, Cincinnati had 46 yards rushing. Cleveland had 49 rushing. Passing game, net yards, This is Joe Burrow we're talking about here. Net yards passing 95 for Cincinnati. Cleveland had 278. This is an incredible game. Cincinnati somehow pulled it out, and if you followed them at all, you know they've had difficulty coming out the gate at the beginning of seasons. They just can't seem to win much going into the beginning of the season. Well, this game was ugly, but they were able to pull out a win. So that's what matters. And now maybe going into their next game next week, we'll see Burrow come back and have a much better game. But that was a rough game for him as far as that goes. All right. Let's look at the teams overall. We'll look at the losing team, the Cleveland Browns. Joe Flacco, 31 completions on 45 attempts for 290 yards and 1 touchdown. Unfortunately, what kept them from winning is he had 2 interceptions. He was sacked twice as well. He had a quarterback rating of 75.2. 290 yards passing, but that 2 interceptions hurt. In the rushing department, it was Sampson. It was a question whether it would be Sampson or Ford going into the game, and it was definitely Sampson. He had 12 carries for only 29 yards for a 2.4 average, but Ford only had 6 carries for 8 yards for a 1.3 yard average, so neither one did anything. They ended up rushing the ball 24 times for 49 yards for a 2.04 average. Really bad. Against a Cincinnati team who is not known for their defense. So they really need to get that rookie on the field, and I'll bet money he's starting next week. After only 1 week of dedicated practice, he'll be out there to replace Sampson and Ford on this team. Now, Sampson, if you did pick him up, he had led the team in rushing and he led the team in receptions. He had 8 catches on 8 targets for 64 yards. So between the two numbers here, rushing and passing, he ended up with 93 total yards, no touchdowns, but not too bad. Fannin had 7 catches for 63 yards on 9 attempts, and Judy, who you would think would be the leading receiver on this team, had 5 catches on 8 targets. So you had quite a few people here with a lot of targets. Sampson, Judy, and Tillman all had 8 times, Fannin 9 times. And then Njoku, their tight end, had 3 catches for 37 yards. He was targeted 6 times. So definitely those top 5 players were targeted the most. 1 touchdown went to Tillman. He had 5 catches for 52 yards on 8 targets. He had one touchdown there. So all those completions, 31 completions, but only 1 touchdown. All right, looking at Cincinnati, how they won this game, interesting. But Joe Burrow, 14 completions on only 23 attempts for 113 yards. Joe Burrow can do that in a quarter. So very interesting to see. He did have 1 touchdown pass, and his quarterback rating was 87.8. In the running department, again, they didn't do very much either. The running backs, for the most part, on most of these games have not had much to say for themselves, but it was Brown. Rushed the ball 21 out of 23 times. He was the only running back to touch the ball. The other 2 carries were by Burrow, who had 2 carries for 3 yards. So 21 carries for Brown for 43 yards for just over a 2.05 yard average. He did have 1 touchdown, so that saved him as far as that go, and he did have 2 catches, but only for 8 yards. So he ended up the game with only a total of 51 yards. Not too good. Thankfully, if you have him on your team, which I'm sure most people had him starting, he only had 1 touchdown, which did help him a little bit. So those are your Cincinnati running backs. Looking at the receiving, again, not much here. Font, 4 catches for 26 yards on 5 targets. T. Higgins, 3 catches for 33 yards on 4 targets. Now Chase, who you would expect, only had 2 catches for 26 yards. He was targeted 5 times. And then Brown, 2 catches on 8 yards for 8 yards. So just interesting game. I'll have to watch that game closely and see really what was happening here, but nothing special. All right, that is the Cincinnati game. Thankfully, if you're a Cincinnati fan, you wanted to get out the gate with a win. You got it. It might have been ugly, but you did get it. All right, next game up, the Miami Dolphins versus the Indianapolis Colts. And this game was a blowout. Indianapolis Colts won the game 33-8. So Miami now leads the series 48 wins to 30. So it's a long ways before Colts can make up all the ground that Dolphins have, but they did win the game. Now going into this game, looking at the Dolphins first, as far as some stats and where they all are. Tyreek Hill was 10th all-time going into the game with 319 receptions. He had 4 in the game to pass, so now he has 323 to pass Devon Best for 9th all-time. Best had 321, so Hill is now 9th. Next up for him is Devontae Parker with 338. Probably take him at least 2-3 weeks to move into 8th all-time, but he's on the move. Now, when we're looking at yards receiving, he still has a little bit. He didn't need that many to pass Duriel Harris for 7th all time. Harris has 4,534. After this game with Tyreek Hill only getting 40 yards receiving, he's now got 4,508. So only needs 27 yards to pass Duriel Harris for 7th all time. So I expect fully that he'll move into 7th all time for the Miami Dolphins as far as that goes. All right. Those are the numbers for the Dolphins. As far as the Colts go, did have Michael Pittman. He needed 6 receptions to tie Bill Brooks all-time in receptions. Bill Brooks is 6th all-time, and Pittman was 7th. They are now tied because Pittman had 6 receptions himself, so he did tie him for 6th all-time. So next week, 1 reception, he'll be 6th all-time by himself. Next up for him is Dallas Clark, who has 427 receptions. So again, that'll take a couple of weeks for Pittman to move into 5th. So those are some of your numbers for the team. Now, looking at the game itself, it's just dominated, like I said. Total net yards for Indianapolis, 418. Miami had 211. In the rushing department, Indianapolis had 156 yards rushing to 78 for Miami on only 12 rushing plays for 6.5-yard carries per carry for Miami, but still not enough there. And obviously, by halftime, they were already down 20-0, so they didn't have time to be running the ball too much. They ended up having to pass it a lot, which didn't really help them out much either. In the passing game, Indianapolis, 262 yards passing to only 133 for Miami. So despite the fact that they had to throw the ball a lot to get into the game, it didn't help. All right, so let's look at the losing team, the Miami Dolphins. Tua Tagovailoa, I hate to say that, I go by Tua, only had 14 completions on 23 attempts for 114 yards. 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, sacked 3 times. His quarterback rating was 51.7. That's horrible. This Miami team really looks in chaos. I don't know what to say. You know, they seem like they could have they have the parts to have a good team, but I don't know what it's going on. Zach Wilson came in late in the game, went 5 completions on 8 attempts for 32 yards to finish off the game for Miami. But by then the game was 23-0 going into the fourth quarter, and it ended up 33-8. So really a rough game. I mean, Miami didn't score until the fourth quarter. And they made a 2-point conversion. That's all they did. And after that scoring attempt halfway through the fourth quarter, then Wilson came in and finished off the game. Now for Indianapolis, well, let me get back to Miami real quick. Let's look at the rest of this. Rushing department, of course, Kane had only seven carries for 55 yards. Tough game. He did have 3 catches for 20 yards and a touchdown, so another running back saved by a touchdown reception. And I'm sure everybody was starting him on their team. After that, there was really nobody in the rushing department. Ollie Gordon came in for 2 carries for 4 yards. So 7 carries in the game, 12 out of there was 7 for a Kane out of a 12 total for 78 yards, and he dominated there. The backup running back Gordon only had 2 carries. In the receiving department, it was Waddle and Hill. Both had 4 receptions. Waddle for 30 yards, Hill for 40 yards. And again, we're back to the kind of a dink and dunk type of thing. They couldn't get anything down the field. Hill was targeted 6 times, Waddle 5 times. So they are the top 2 receivers. Now, Washington had 2 for 20 yards. He was targeted 5 times. Out of the backfield, Kane had 3 catches for 20 yards, and he was also targeted 4 times. So Etienne, I think it's more like Etienne, ended up with a total of, 75 yards and 1 touchdown. So, not too bad of a game overall as far as stats go, but really it was a rough game. The ball got spread around. I mean, no one had more than 4 catches in the 19 total receptions for the team. Really, it was just an ugly game for them. Now, looking at Indianapolis, Daniel Jones, and he deservedly grabbed that number 1 starting spot. He was 22 completions on 29 attempts for 272 yards for a quarterback rating of 115.9. Really a good game for him. Had a touchdown pass, no interceptions, was only sacked 1 time. So he really did have a good game. Now in the rushing department, it was Jonathan Taylor, obviously, 18 carries for 71 yards. And he would have, you hate to see a blowout if you're a fantasy guy, because then they put Giddens in. He had 12 carries for 41 yards. But, there's why have Taylor out there in the fourth quarter when they're already up 23-0 going into the fourth quarter? You might as well let some backups play. Now, Daniel Jones did have 7 carries for 26 yards himself and 2 touchdowns. He had the 2 rushing touchdowns. And this is what's going to hurt, why I don't like to pick often running backs who have quarterbacks that do a lot of running and for touchdowns. It took those touchdowns away from Taylor. But Jones had 7 carries, 26 yards, and 2 touchdowns. On the receiving department, it was Warren, the tight end, really had a good game, 7 catches, 76 yards on 9 targets. And then Michael Pittman had 6 receptions for 80 yards, 1 touchdown on 8 targets. So those were by far the 2 leading receivers. Taylor out of the backfield did have 3 catches for 27 yards. So he had a total of 21 touches in this game. Taylor did for 98 yards. No touchdowns, though. That's what hurts. Downs, who a lot of people praise as one of the, really hidden talents, but he only had 2 catches on 3 targets, 2 catches for 12 yards. They really do have a good team here, and it's going to be interesting to see. You can see how well they played, and, their stars, Jones, Taylor, and their tight end, Warren, they could really have dialed it back by the end of the third quarter. So, you could see even bigger numbers by this team going into their next games coming up. So Indianapolis wins the game 33-8. All right. Let's see here. Do one more game, and then we'll move on. Maybe 2 more games, really. All right, let's look at the Las Vegas Raiders and the New England Patriots. This game, the Patriots lead the series 21-0. wins to 18. Las Vegas closed the gap by 1 with their win. They ended up winning the game 20-13 over the Patriots. Tight game all the way through and away. New England was leading at the half at 10-7, but Vegas came in pretty good in the third quarter and pulled into the lead and then held on at the end to win 20-13. Now in this game, again, not many stats to talk about. Talk about Max Crosby though, for the Raiders. He's already the team's leader in tackles for loss, and he had one more to his total, so he's now got 106 tackles for loss to lead the Raiders all time. In the sack department, going into the game, he needed 2 to move into a tie for 4th. He only got 1. So 4th place is Ike Lassiter, way back in the 60s, had 61.5 sacks. Max Crosby now has 60.5. So he needs 1 to tie Ike Lassiter, 1.5 to tie Ben Davidson for 3rd, and 2 to move into 3rd all by himself. So right now, Max Crosby, like I said, has 60.5. So he'll be a fun guy to watch. He won't obviously make the number 1. Greg Townsend has 107.5 sacks all time for the team. But with his new contract, and expect him to play a few more years, if he can get at least 10 this year, we'll see. He'd probably need, if he gets only 10, he's going to need 4 years to catch Townsend, I mean. But we'll see how he does. So that's the only stat we can talk about in this game. Now, looking at the team stats, it was a close game. The Raiders had 389 total yards. New England had 336. Another game, maybe we'll see this next game where the rushing games look better than they did in any of these games so far, really, except for the Jaguars with ETN, at least the ones I've talked about so far. But in the rushing department, the Raiders, 24 rushes for 56 yards, not too good, 2.38 yard average. New England, 18 rushing plays for 60 yards for a 3.3. Now, in the passing department, Geno Wilson, total net passing, 333 yards for the Raiders, 276 for New England. So the passing game was on display here overall. Now, looking at the losing team, New England, Drake May, 30 completions on 46 attempts for 287 yards, 1 touchdown. He did throw an interception, and he was sacked 4 times. He was harassed in this game constantly, sacked 4 times, which really hurt. This game, the penalties, I don't know what was happening here, and some of them obviously were legit, but it just seemed the penalties flew in this game exorbitantly. It really, really interrupted the whole play of this game. Now, in the running department, Henderson only had 5 rushes for 27 yards. So not that great. Now, Stevenson, the other running back, had 7 carries, but only 15 yards. So for a 2.14 average. Henderson had 5 carries, like I said, for a 5.4 average. But 14 of those are on 1 play, so 4 carries for 13 yards on the rest of them. But he still definitely looked better as far as that goes. And then Drake May had 4 carries himself, but only for 11 yards. Looking at the receiving game, Boutte was the guy. It's kind of interesting is to see who was going to be the receivers here. And honestly, it was Boutte, Diggs, and Henderson all had 6 catches apiece. But Boutte had 6 catches for 103 yards, really a good game on 8 targets. Diggs had 6 catches for 57 yards, more of the underneath guy on 7 targets. And then Henderson had 6 catches for 24 yards on 6 targets. So he caught all his passes thrown his way, but only for 24 yards, 4-point yard average. So if you were starting Henderson, he only made out 51 yards and no touchdowns, unfortunately. It wasn't saved like a lot of the running backs we talked about by the touchdowns. All right, those were your leading receivers. Hunter Henry, had 4 catches on 8 targets for 66 yards. He did have a big catch, 27-yarder. And the other one was Douglas. Douglas, he was another one to watch as far as receivers. He had 2 catches for -2 yards. Isn't that crazy? But he did have a 2-yard touchdown catch. So 2 catches, -2 yards, but 1 touchdown. That's crazy. And he was throwing the ball his way 7 times, but he only had 2 catches. I don't know about that. We're going to have to see how that goes. And if they start shifting over to Boutte, he looked good. And obviously Diggs is a seasoned pro. So we'll have to see how they move this around. Now looking at the Raiders, Geno Smith, 24 completions on 34 attempts for 362 yards. Really a good game there. 1 touchdown, did have 1 interception, but he had a quarterback rating of 102.8. So pretty good game for him. Now they did try to feed the ball to Giante. He had 19 carries for only 38 yards, 2.0 average, but he did have 1 touchdown. So that was a saving thing. They ran the ball 24 times. Gente had 19 of the carries. Smith had 2, and White, coming off the bench, had 3. Looking at the receiving department, a couple of big players here. Jacoby Myers had 8 catches for 97 yards. Really a good game on 10 targets. So he was targeted the most, but Bowers was right behind him. He had 5 catches for 103 yards. So they both had big games. Bowers was targeted 8 times, so he caught 5 out of 8. So they both had the big games. Now Tucker only had 2 catches, but one of them, that was the touchdown catch. He had 2 catches for 54 yards. Another wide receiver, Meyer, had 4 catches for 38. Now, Gente only had 2 catches for 2 yards. I thought you might see more of him coming out of the backfield, but no, it was mostly the wide receivers. And that's because Smith likes to throw it down the field a little bit more, not so much to the running backs. He'll rather gamble on those long passes. So even Thornton had a good game, 2 catches for 45 on 4 targets, and he almost had another catch too. But so really the wide receivers did quite well here, and Bowers, of course. So a good game for them overall. And in this game, like I said, Vegas held on to win 20-13. Now we're going to finish this one more game because this is the last 1:00 game. We'll look at the New York Giants versus the Washington Commanders. Now, the Giants lead this series 108 wins to 74 for the Commanders and 5 ties. So the Commanders were able to pick up one more game, but it'll be, like I said, a long time, as I said in other games, before they catch the Giants overall. Now, looking at some of the stats in this game, the only team to really look at is the Commanders. Terry McLaurin, he needed a little over 100 yards, and he only had 27 in the game, so he's still at 6th all-time behind Bobby Mitchell. So maybe the next game, he now needs 87 yards in his next game to pass Bobby Mitchell for 5th. And the same in tackles for loss department. Darren Payne had 1 tackle for loss. He's now got 59, and he's looking to catch Jonathan Allen, who has 60. Now, Allen was with a team last year, but it's now playing for Minnesota. But he's 2nd all-time on the team with 60 tackles for loss. So Payne now needs 1 to tie, 2 to pass him. So those are the only records of note for this game. Now, looking at the team stats, big game by Washington as far as total net yards, 232 net yards to the Giants' 231. And on the ground, rushing, the Commanders had 220 yards rushing versus 74 for the Giants. So really a good game there. Passing game, Giants had 157 yards passing. The Commanders had 212. So really a good game for the Commanders. They really had it under control. I mean, sometimes it didn't look great, but, they're still working at it. But they did have a pretty good game. 25 first downs for the Commanders in this game. And they, like I said, they had a pretty even game here between the running and the passing. All right, let's look at the losing team, the New York Giants. Well, Russell Wilson had a rough game. He's only sacked twice, which is amazing that he's only sacked twice, honestly. But he had 17 completions on 37 attempts. At this rate, they'll have the rookie in there before some people thought. But 17 out of 37 for 168 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions, quarterback rating of 59.3. That's not good. He really had a rough time. And it's just was difficult. In the running department, he actually led the team in rushing on 8 attempts for 44 yards. Tracy had 10 carries for 24 yards. Now, this game wasn't completely out of hand. I mean, at halftime, it was already 14-3, but it was never completely a blowout. And by the end of the third quarter, it was 14-6. So there was some running going on, try to maintain a balanced game, but the Giants just didn't have it. So the Giants ended up with 23 rushing attempts for 74 yards for a 3.2 average. Just okay. But Tracy, 10 for 24. We'll have to see how this is going to go. Now, Scatabo came in, he had 2 carries, but minus 3 yards. So didn't impress either, but only had 2 carries. In the receiving department, well, Robinson and Neighbors. Robinson had actually more receptions, 6 receptions for 55 yards on 8 targets. Now, Neighbors had more yards, 5 receptions, 71 yards. He was targeted 12 times, had 5 receptions on 12 targets. And the teams are just sitting there looking for him, which makes it that much more difficult to get him open. But, yeah, those were the only 2 really receivers. Scatabo had 2 catches for 12 yards, as well as Tracy 2 for 11. Just not very impressive in the passing game. All right, let's take a look at the Commanders. Daniels, 19 completions on 30 attempts for 233 yards and 1 touchdown. He was sacked 3 times. They were after him pretty well in this game, too, the Giants. They have a good defense. Anyway, Daniels ended up with a quarterback rating of 98.3. In the running department, Daniels led the team in rushes with 11 for 68 yards. And Merritt, interestingly, was the guy that came in. There was a question of who was going to be, but it was Merritt. Had 10 attempts for 82 yards, but one was a 42-yard rush. He had 1 touchdown. So pretty good game for him. 10 carries, 82 yards, and a touchdown. Eckler did have 6 carries for 26 yards. So those are your top. And they did run the ball 32 times, but like I said, Jaden Daniels had 11 of those. So it was Merritt and Daniels leading the team. In the receiving department, Deebo Samuels did come in and did have a good game. 7 catches, 77 yards to lead the team by quite a bit, really. 10 targets. No one was even close. Zach Ertz had 5 targets, the second most, but Deebo Samuels was targeted by Daniels a lot. Eckler had 3 receptions for 31 yards. And if you're looking and wondering, Terry McLaurin, only 2 catches for 27 yards. I don't know if it had something to do with not practicing as much or the contract situation or whatever, but not a good game for him. Of course, with the Giants defense, he was pretty well shut down. Zach Ertz did have 3 catches for 26 yards, but it was Deebo Samuels could get open. Seemed like anytime he wanted to. None of them were super long. 21-yard was his longest reception, but he was good for 3 first downs. He did have a good game. And I had heard a lot going into this that he was looking pretty good. as somebody that Daniels was going to be looking at to save him when he's running around. All right, so that is that game. Washington ends up winning it 21-6. That's a look at the games, the 1:00 games on Sunday. My next podcast will look at the games from the night games and also the Monday night game. So that'll be interesting to see how the rest of these games go. See if there's anybody that can have a better game, running game. Really, we're talking about one guy, ETN, had a really good rushing game. All right, that is a wrap for this episode. I appreciate you listening. It was longer than I expected, but I wanted to get all those 1:00 games. I appreciate if you like and subscribe. You can do that on YouTube at Just the Stats NFL. Also, Facebook, X, Instagram, all these Just the Stats NFL, and email the same at justthestatsnfl@gmail.com. Appreciate you listening, and that is a wrap for this episode of Just the Stats NFL. Until next time, I'm out.